So 6 out of 10 Americans think race relations are declining. I am guessing you have a picture in your head of who is to blame for this. I'm going to tell you that we are all part of the problem. I'm also going to offer you a little bit more. I'm going to tell you how, with the right kind of effort, we can turn things around. All right, so there's plenty of evidence to support the recent nosedive in race relations. Let's look at some of it. All right, so the most recent FBI hate crime report showed a 17% increase in the number of hate crimes between 2016 and 2017. Experts say that the more than 7,000 hate crimes that the FBI reported is most certainly an undercount. I'm going to talk a little bit about why it's an undercount in a few minutes. So the next hate crime report that we receive in probably a few weeks is likely to be even more concerning. Why? Well, unfortunately, we've recently seen many hate murders. For instance, 12 were killed in attacks that were bias motivated in synagogues in Pittsburgh and San Diego. 22 people were killed just this August by a man targeting Mexicans in an El Paso Walmart. And the hate murders are just a piece of it. And in fact, they're a tiny piece of it. It's more than just these shootings. White supremacists have created campaigns targeting those that they believe to be open to their ideology. There have been leafleting on college campuses, including the campus here in town. We've seen recruitment flyers left on people's lines. There is also online solicitation. And sadly, white supremacists are getting results. For instance, the number of Twitter users who self-identify as white nationalists has increased 600% since 2012. And this is just the little stuff. The really bad news is that this country is not prepared to deal with such a massive increase in white supremacist activities. And here's why. I'm going to offer a couple of reasons why. First, the few institutions that we have to respond to hate crimes are very weak. So the FBI hate crime report that I talked about a second ago, it showed that more than 80% of police departments in this country reported that not a single hate crime had happened in their jurisdiction in the previous year. Not one, not even one. They turned in a number of 0. This is important because police departments are very important to the recognition of hate crime. Police departments are responsible for catching perpetrators of hate crime, and if the police do not say an incident is a hate crime, then it will never be prosecuted as such. It's kind of hard to blame the police completely for this. And part of the reason for the low numbers is that departments reporting low numbers have to grapple with all of the difficulty involved in investigating hate crime. There are a couple of different reasons hate crime is so hard to investigate. The first is that there are free speech issues. We don't want police officers arresting people for hate crimes if they've just told racist jokes. The second issue involves those who are targeted by hate crime. Many of those individuals who are targeted by hate crime rightly mistrust the police to deal with the fact that hate crime has been committed against them, so they don't even report hate crimes. We see this in the numbers. When you look at the number of hate crimes victims say are occurring, there's a really big difference with the FBI numbers. This is the FBI numbers again, 7,000 hate crimes. This is the number when you ask individuals who've been targeted by hate crime, how many hate crimes happen annually? 250,000. Pretty big difference between the 7,000 that police say happened. All right, so police can do a better job. I know, because I've seen them do it. So my first book, Policing Hatred, was based on 5.5 months I spent embedded in a police hate crime unit. I did this in the late 90s. I studied one of the best police hate crime units in the country in its heyday. This was a specialized detective unit responsible for investigating all the hate crimes in the city. In the book, I call this city Center City. That's not its real name. The statute in Center City allowed the unit to investigate crimes motivated by bias on the basis of race, religion, sexual orientation, and gender. I had open access to the unit. A badge let me into the office whenever I wanted to be there. I could come and go as I liked. I looked through their files. I talked to detectives. I went on ride-alongs with them. I went to court with them, patrols, investigations. And I know you're thinking, not really the aesthetic for a police researcher. But oddly enough, I didn't stick out as much as you might think, because one of the strengths of this unit was that it was actually racially diverse. The Center City Hate Crime Detective Unit had people who were Latinx, Asian Americans, men and women, black men, black women, white men. So very, very diverse. This is the first thing. The diversity is the first thing that the commanders of the unit did correctly. They had detectives investigating hate crime who looked like individuals who were targeted by hate crime in the city. The second thing that was done quite well in the unit was that it was a specialized unit that only focused on hate crime. Investigating hate crime is really hard work for any detectives that undertake this difficult task. And one of the things that you have to do is separate the incidents that you receive that may have slurs and other markers of bias and aren't actually hate crimes. So, in talking to the detectives and going through their files, I developed a set of types of cases that may be referred as hate crimes but aren't actually bias motivated. There are 4 types of cases: traffic accidents, neighbor disputes, drug deals gone bad, and fights. All of these are fairly intuitive with the exception of traffic accidents. So traffic accidents, this is how traffic accidents work. A couple of cars collide, the drivers get out to exchange information, they end up exchanging fisticuffs, slurs are used. The detectives readily understood that these particular incidents are not motivated by bias. They're actually motivated by the fact that there's been a traffic accident, and they did not refer them to prosecutors. All of this inquiry required long and detailed investigations. They had to figure out who the perpetrator was and why they engaged in the activity. Spending this much time with individuals to figure out these complicated issues often took hours and hours over many, many months, and allowed the detectives to develop true empathy with the victims. In fact, most of the detectives referred to the victims in their past cases as my victim. So, a specialized unit for hate crime is really expensive. It has the advantage, however, of addressing hate crimes in a way that gains the trust of the victims. Unfortunately, this is happening in very few cities in this country. In most cities, we simply can't trust the police to investigate hate crime or catch the perpetrators. All right, the second reason we're not prepared. The second reason we're not prepared for the racial onslaught of hate crimes that's now and coming has to do with us. Unfortunately, it's the case that too many Americans have kept themselves racially separate. We live in separate neighborhoods, we attend separate schools, we send our children to separate schools, and we have entirely separate social networks. Here's an example, take neighborhoods. According to an analysis of the 2010 census, the typical white person lives in a neighborhood that is 79% white. This is by choice, it's not by happenstance. Research has shown that whites' perceptions of neighborhoods' desirability is based on the number of minorities that live in the neighborhoods. The more minorities, the less desirable whites see the neighborhood, and the less likely they are to choose it. This is irrespective of whether the neighborhood is safe, middle class, or affluent. It's not just neighborhoods. We don't even have contact outside of schools or outside of work. One recent study of social media showed the social networks of the majority of whites were 94% white. Our separation has great cost. Our separation, combined with the prevalence of hate incidents around the country, means that you may be targeted or you may be asked what side you're on. The urgency of the current situation means that there is no time and no place for anyone to be a bystander. So, to help you avoid being a bystander, I'm going to close with a couple of tips for connecting across the race lines. All right, first tip. If your social networks contain people who look just like you, you need to expand them. Expand your social networks across race lines. All right, this is hard to do, but one of the things that you can do to help expand your social network across race lines is speak up about everyday racist remarks, racist tweets, racist Facebook posts, racist jokes. You cannot bridge the gap between yourself and a person of color if you make these jokes, right? Make racist jokes. Or if you stand idly by when someone makes them in your presence. Third tip. As a person of color, I've heard just about everything. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Just reach out. And finally, related to the issue of reaching out, if someone is reaching out a hand, truly, you should take it. All right, I'm not going to lie. This is going to be awkward. Working toward racial progress is kind of like one of those three-legged races you may have done as a kid. You know, you stand side by side, your inner legs are tied together, you put your arm around the other person's shoulder, and you try to move, right? It's really hard to move at first, but you know, if you work together, you can do it. Moving toward racial progress is kind of like that. We have to embrace working together if we're going to get anywhere at all. So let's begin this. Our future as a great country depends on it. Thank you.